Do you really believe you know the whole history of humanity? What if what was always taught in schools was only the permitted version, carefully shaped to keep you in ignorance? While they convinced you that ancient mysteries were only myths, declassified documents and buried accounts reveal a much deeper conspiracy. In 1978, renowned scientists are said to have taken part in a secret meeting with non-human entities in Eastern Europe. But this meeting never appeared in history books. Why did no one talk about it? Why did researchers connected to the case disappear from official records? Common belief says that if it were true, it would have already come to light. But what if the exact opposite is real? If silence is the greatest proof that something extraordinary was hidden? In this video, you will discover how forbidden archaeology, mysterious astronomy, and complicit institutions connect in a hidden thread that spans millennia. Get ready. What is coming may dismantle certainties you have carried since childhood. What if the entire history of humanity you learned was a carefully staged farce? From an early age, school books shaped official narratives, but omitted fundamental questions. Archives from the 1930s already showed how ministries of education in European countries defined which archaeological discoveries could be disclosed and which should be hidden, creating a selective filter of history. Cases such as the discovery of the rock engravings of Val Camonica in Italy in 1909 show how certain records of primitive astronomy were initially classified as folkloric interpretations and only decades later recognized as evidence of advanced knowledge. UNESCO itself, in reports from 1968, pointed out discrepancies between what excavations revealed and what reached classrooms. Why do these inconsistencies remain untouched? In 1872, George Smith of the British Museum translated the Epic of Gilgamesh and exposed references to a global flood far earlier than the biblical account. But his discovery was framed as myth and not as archaeological evidence. The same occurred in 1929 when excavations in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey suggested monumental constructions 10,000 years before the official chronology accepted. Yet academia took nearly half a century to acknowledge the relevance of the site. These silences, independent researchers point out, are not oversights but strategies. Who decided that certain Sumerian manuscripts would be only literature, while other records from the same period were treated as historical documents? Who determined that astronomical alignments in Mayan temples should be described as coincidence and not as ancestral wisdom? The pattern repeats itself: restricted archaeology, minimized astronomy, and ancient mysteries reduced to curiosities. Documents confirm that in 1952, the Vatican Library locked away access to more than 25,000 manuscripts classified as heretical, many of them describing celestial contacts and lost engineering techniques. Then, in 1972, files from the Smithsonian Institution revealed the destruction of giant skeletons found in the Ohio River Valley, in the United States, a fact announced in unofficial reports published during the American Antiquarian Journal. What explains such systematic censorship? Is it merely protection against fanciful interpretations, or deliberate concealment of an alternative history that would change the perception of who we are? The omitted records make it clear that there are invisible but consistent gaps. After all, if there is nothing to hide, why do so many documents disappear, so many voices are silenced, and so many discoveries never reach the public? Who decided what you should forget? In 1978, unofficial reports describe an episode that most people have never heard mentioned, a secret meeting between scientists and non-human entities somewhere in Eastern Europe, recorded only in fragments of archives and scattered memories. Researchers such as Timothy Good, in his work Above Top Secret 1987, cite testimonies from officials who mentioned a clandestine conference that took place in Czechoslovakian territory at the time, supervised by Soviet military, but never officially acknowledged. Restricted circulation documents found in the U.S.C. National Archives, dated 1982 and partially declassified in 1995, allude to international scientific meetings with unusual protocols, but without detailing names or objectives. Curiously, some academics who were invited disappeared from public records soon after that date, with careers abruptly cut short and research withdrawn from circulation. The situation recalls the case of secret meetings held in Los Alamos in the 1940s, when physicists involved in the Manhattan Project had their reports censored under claims of national security, creating a pattern of information control over sensitive science. Unverified accounts also connect the 1978 episode to the famous KGB Blue Files case. Documents allegedly leaked in 1991, which mention contacts with beings of unknown origin and describe technical cooperation protocols in fields such as astronomy and energy engineering. Why, then, was this specific meeting ridiculed and buried so quickly if it was nothing more than rumor? What was the real risk of allowing information of this level to come to light? Independent sources point out that researchers from Hungary and Poland, supposedly present, never published again after 1979, coinciding with the intensification of scientific censorship in the Soviet bloc. There are parallels with Operation High Jump in 1947, when Uzbeki Navy reports on activities in Antarctica were kept secret for more than 40 years, fueling theories of forbidden encounters. In both cases, the official narrative always sought to discredit those involved. If there was nothing to hide, why did records of scientists' trips vanish from passports, as shown by an internal audit of the Moscow Institute of Physics in 1984? If there was no conference at all, how can one explain internal correspondence from German universities warning about atypical events in the East during the same period? The absence of official records does not end the mystery. On the contrary, it reinforces the pattern of deliberate erasure. After all, what was so dangerous about this meeting that it had to be swept from history? The silence surrounding the 1978 meeting was not an accident, but part of a coordinated censorship mechanism. Documents confirm that between 1979 and 1983, internal reports from the KGB and the Soviet Ministry of Defense exerted direct pressure on universities in Eastern Europe, instructing rectors to reject any publication linked to unidentified phenomena. Similar cases occurred in the West. Declassified CIA memoranda in 1992 revealed the existence of the Robertson Panel 1953, which recommended publicly ridiculing reports of extraterrestrial contacts to protect national security and control academic opinion. It is no coincidence that, right after 1978, scientific journals such as Nature and Science refused articles that explored correlations between forbidden archaeology and mysterious astronomy, citing lack of methodology. An important parallel arises in 1969 when NASA abruptly shut down Project Blue Book, despite internal reports acknowledging 701 unexplained cases. The pattern repeats systematic concealment, destruction of reputations, and manipulation of records. In 1980, Hungarian physicist András Nagy had his career ended after presenting, in Budapest, data on astronomical alignments in Neolithic sites. Records of the event were removed from university libraries in less than a year. Why would so many institutions from different countries move in unison to deny the existence of a single event? What was the real reason for silencing researchers across multiple continents at the same time? Unverified accounts indicate that between 1981 and 1984, UNESCO faced diplomatic pressure to postpone conferences on ancestral wisdom and cultural astronomy, restricting debates on ancient contacts. Contested reports from the Moscow Institute of Strategic Studies, dated 1985, mention covert cooperation between Soviet and U.S. security agencies to prevent certain findings from reaching the public. This complicity between governments and universities recalls earlier episodes, such as the case of the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in 1947, which remained in the possession of a small group of scholars until the 1990s, delaying public access. If there was nothing extraordinary, why delay disclosure for so long? Why risk careers, reputations, and entire institutions in the name of silence? The answer always seems to point to something greater than simple human error, a global strategy of concealment whose logic only begins to make sense when connected to the signs that come from the forgotten past. The 1978 meeting was not an isolated episode, but part of a line of continuity that goes back to immemorial times. Excavations in Mesopotamia had already recorded since the 19th century clay tablets describing celestial beings who taught advanced astronomy to ancient peoples. Researcher Zecharia Sitchin, in his 1976 translations, highlighted how the Sumerians cited specific constellations and orbital knowledge impossible for their time. Although his interpretations are contested by official academia, archaeological records confirm that temples such as Karnak in Egypt possess solar and stellar alignments of millimetric precision, described in studies from the Journal of Archaeological Science in 2003, pointing to techniques that would only be replicable with modern instrumentation. In 1924, archaeologist Albert Grunwedel documented Buddhist inscriptions in Turfan, Central Asia, that reported instructors coming from the stars, but his publication was quickly discredited and archived. Why do structures built 5,000 years ago display astronomical knowledge only rediscovered in the digital age? How can sites far apart, such as Stonehenge in England and Chichén Itzá in Mexico, share nearly identical geometric and observational patterns? Unverified reports from Vatican archives mention that in 1487, ecclesiastical astronomers were already comparing indigenous myths from the Americas with Mesopotamian narratives about celestial visitors, but such documents were never made available to the public. The coincidence of patterns also appears in Teotihuacan, whose pyramid layout corresponds to the three central stars of Orion, a fact acknowledged in a 1995 study published in the Journal for the History of Astronomy. Related cases include the Nazca Lines in Peru, identified in 1927, and linked to astronomical observations by Maria Rajka in her 1949 reports, but constantly minimized as ritual art. Could this repetition of symbols and alignments be indicating a matrix of knowledge deliberately transmitted and later erased? Who truly laid the foundations of civilization, and why does official history insist on denying the possibility of an ancestral wisdom shared globally? In 1964, Alexander Thom published calculations showing that British megalithic circles followed a standard unit of measurement, the megalithic yard, connecting different sites through a system that suggests standardized science and not tribal improvisation. If this network of knowledge crossed millennia, what is the missing link that ties these structures to the 1978 meeting? And more unsettling, who maintains the line of continuity to this day? The stars hold secrets that official narratives avoid acknowledging. Archaeological records confirm that constellations such as Orion, the Pleiades, and Sirius appear repeatedly in Sumerian, Egyptian, and Mayan myths, spanning millennia and distinct cultures. In 1969, French astronomer Robert Bauval demonstrated that the layout of the Giza pyramids corresponded to Orion's belt, a thesis expanded in the Orion Mystery, 1994, contested by part of academia but never conclusively refuted. Documents confirm that the Greenwich Observatory, recorded in 1790, reports from navigators describing the use of the Pleiades as a navigation guide on transoceanic routes, a practice also reported in Australian indigenous traditions. If different peoples, in times and places so distant, saw the same stars as a central reference, was it coincidence or a coded reminder of something greater? In 1976, a NASA study analyzed alignments of Andean monuments and found correlations with solstices and equinoxes. But the report was archived without broad disclosure, reinforcing the hypothesis that certain space agencies avoid publicly exploring cultural connections with ancient astronomy. The same occurred in 1998, when a group of independent Chilean astronomers presented at the International Astronomical Union Conference an analysis showing that the Tiwanaku complex contained precise markers to track Venus cycles, but the proposal was met with institutional silence. Why do prestigious organizations insist on ignoring such clear patterns? In 2013, the Archaeastronomical Institute of Dresden published a contested analysis suggesting that the Mayan calendar not only measured solar cycles, but also reflected rare stellar conjunctions, a fact that would completely change the historical reading of that civilization. Why do recurring constellations cross cultural boundaries as if they were universal reminders? If the sky tells a different story from the one taught, what exactly does it reveal about our origins and about the connection to the erased 1978 meeting? Unverified accounts suggest that Soviet astronomers who participated in the secret conference were studying unusual patterns in Sirius B, whose description was already present in the Dogon myths of West Africa long before modern astronomy confirmed its existence in 1862. How did peoples without telescopes have access to this knowledge? The pattern is clear myths, monuments, and modern discoveries always converge on the same constellations, yet official explanations remain confined to folklore or coincidence. If there is nothing to fear, why are the stars still treated as forbidden territory? If the 1978 meeting really happened, humanity is no longer who it thinks it is. A new chronology rises silently behind the official books. Ancient civilizations that mastered astronomy and engineering, complicit institutions that coordinated global censorship, and an interplanetary contact that remains out of the reach of the common citizen. Documents confirm that internal UN reports from 1981 discussed the need to prevent social panic in the face of rumors of non-human contacts, although they were never officially disclosed to the public. This guiding thread of deliberate concealment connects separate episodes: the giant skeletons suppressed by the Smithsonian in the 19th century, the Dead Sea Scrolls, withheld for decades, the destruction of Mayan records during the Spanish colonization, and the removal of articles on mysterious astronomy from major scientific journals starting in the 1970s. Why does this pattern repeat across different continents and different eras, always converging on the same forbidden elements? Unverified accounts mention that scientists present at the 1978 meeting received instructions that connected hidden archaeological discoveries to the cosmology of ancient peoples, suggesting that the line separating history and conspiracy is thinner than imagined. Independent studies such as those of Paul Devereaux in 1989 point out that Neolithic constructions aligned to lunar cycles would only make sense if integrated into a context of external knowledge, and this data echoes records long before modern science itself. Is humanity living under an artificial chronology, shaped to limit the perception of its true origins? Why would governments and academic institutions act together, even when divided by political ideologies, as in the case of the Cold War, to maintain this unified narrative? The connection between ancient civilizations and the 1978 meeting opens the possibility that part of the alternative history lies not only in forbidden books or declassified documents, but also in the invisible decisions that shaped education, science, and official astronomy. If this interplanetary contact was indeed real, the inevitable question remains: who are we in the face of this imposed silence? And more disturbing, what else has been hidden from you? Now that you have gone through each piece of evidence, each record, and each deliberate silence, the question turns to you. What will you do with this knowledge? Perhaps the 1978 meeting is nothing more than a construction fueled by contested documents and unverified reports. Perhaps it is a real conspiracy, carefully coordinated to never come to light. If scientists and aliens truly met, that would completely change the vision we have of history. But if it is all nothing more than a collective mistake, what does that reveal about our need to seek answers in ancient mysteries, archaeology, and astronomy? How many secrets are still buried, and how many alternative versions will continue to emerge? Leave in the comments what you think. Are we facing a real and systematic conspiracy, or just exaggerated interpretations? Do you believe new revelations may still arise, or do you prefer to remain skeptical in the face of all this? If you want to keep following investigations like this, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. That way you guarantee access to the next episodes and continue exploring secrets that few dare to reveal.